Welcome back to Minecraft Through the Ages, the only Minecraft series where the ancient versions I'm playing that were new for mere hours before being replaced are allowed to be analyzed in feature film-length production cycles. Alright, you have to understand, I need to joke, because last time I promised the next episode would come out soon. Oops. Now, let me just make it very clear that there's not actually 400 days of work in this episode, and let me really welcome you back to Minecraft Through the Ages, my series where I've been updating a single world through every version of Minecraft ever released in order, and covering all the changes made along the way to both my world and the game. We talked last episode about how this update changes a lot, and how exciting that is, but to someone who, for example, hasn't seen classic Minecraft in about over a year, it might actually be hard to tell what's different. It's not just that it's obvious, I promise. This hotbar, while seeming familiar to essentially anyone that's ever played Minecraft, ever, is completely new to the game. It remains relatively unchanged for the next 15 years, thus it slots pretty well into the game now, and in our modern mind that only makes sense, but it turns out people at the time agreed. This idea of having a hotbar to be able to scroll through is so much nicer than the old hotkey system, and it's exactly the kind of addition that is a straightforward upgrade. Well, that would be the case if not for one thing. Yeah, I'll forgive you for not noticing, but there actually aren't enough slots for all the blocks that we have at this time on the hotbar. Even now, with our very limited palette and omitted block IDs, we still end up with 2 extra blocks that don't fit after our new additions. Yeah, I promise we'll get to the spongy elephant in the room soon. The 2 blocks that are simply left out for us for a while aren't insignificant blocks either. They made me give up sand, something very distinct in color in this version and that I was using often, and cobblestone. Now these are pretty foundational blocks in a lot of our recent builds made up to this point, and losing them is a big deal. It also presents a pretty big challenge for me, as if, let's say, you were to break one piece of cobblestone, like I have a few times, I've just gotta wait it out. Be sure to go on to judge my builds under these pretenses. So, we lost 2 very important blocks, not great, but what are they replaced by? What's actually new in this update? Well, thankfully, these blocks are pretty interesting, so let's start with sponge. Now, we'll have to look a bit into the future, something that we've been limiting in this series to talk about where sponges will end up. I want to try and talk about most things in this series as if they were truly the newest addition, but man, sponge just has such a strange history, so let's just follow sponges for a bit. Obviously, we know when it was added, June 19, 2009, with the advent of 19A. While we're here, I'll mention that 0.0.19a to 0.0.19a underscore 03 as well as 0.0.19a underscore 05 are all lost to time. This is sad, but luckily nothing in any of those updates other than 19a goes that far beyond minor bug fixes. Okay, getting back to sponges, they have this rather interesting texture, but also some pretty neat functionality. When placed down, a 2-block square radius around the sponge absorbs water. This is to say that water just magically doesn't flow if it's being blocked by the sponge's aura, and is deleted if in its proximity. You can actually make pretty cool builds with sponges in this version, if not for the fact that sponges in 19a decay, in the same way that something like shrubs should decay when placed on stone or without sunlight. Over time, sponges in version 19a will simply disappear. Notch described this mechanic as the sponges drying out, but this obviously sucks, and after some feedback was changed for the next version. The sponges that we actually get to play with in 19a underscore 04 remain unchanged until InfDev February 27th, and the only difference from 19a is the aforementioned lack of vanishing. I tried to build with sponges as often as possible in this update, to be honest with you, as I will essentially have no reason to do so later. So, dotted around the map now are some more sponge-related builds. I mainly built some scattered water features and a boat with a sponge sail, stuff like that around the map at a pretty small scale, but it is somewhat of a classic world tradition to also build a Menger sponge out of sponge. I can't remember if it was Blue Crab 2 or Method that I first found the idea from, but I think it can be traced back all the way to 2010, and has always been something that I've just found interesting. A Menger sponge, or Menger cube, also I think known as a Sierpinski sponge or cube, is a fractal curve. This is a concept you've 100% seen with your own eyes in the form of an infinitely zooming video titled Oddly Satisfying Challenge, Get to the End, Impossible, with like 100 exclamation marks and 100 red arrows in the thumbnail, but it's simply a mathematical curve whose shape retains the same general pattern of irregularity, regardless of how high it's magnified. In layman's term, it's just a shape that can be exponentially grown. And the Menger sponge is special because it's a 3-dimensional example. Not only that, but it's represented with cubes, something we so happen to have a lot of. Now that we've fully covered Sponge in depth, we can move on to the other big player of this update, the new glass block, and I mean finally. Oh man, what a welcome addition. In our world, up until this point, if we wanted to put something as simple as a window in our house, we had nothing other than leaves as a semi-transparent block in the game. Glass is the second semi-transparent block added, but it more than leaves leans into the transparent part of that title. This is what the first glass texture looked like. You see, I mentioned the leaves texture because they really do have a striking resemblance to the first iteration of glass. It comes out looking very busy, with lots of light blue colors in the texture, which makes it feel to me more like something that needs to have its clear pixels replaced by stone and be made into an ore. Funnily enough, Notch agreed, stating plainly it looks bad, and it looked bad enough that upon releasing 19A, this is what the texture looked like. This time around, it's a fully translucent texture, and while nowhere is it opaque, it does still have the white and blue streaks from the last one. You might notice, though, that despite being the true first glass texture ever used in the game, no one ever talks about it like ever. Well, there's one unshockingly simple reason if you know anything about classic Minecraft. I feel the need to reiterate that these versions were released to the public, 19A through _06, all released over the course of one day. That, combined with the fact that no one thought this game was even something worth preserving in the first place, and the versions of the game got lost fast. This version, 19A, is lost, and lost with it is the texture. You might think that we would still at least know what the texture looked like, but for the longest time it was even more dire than that, as we had very few screenshots of 19A. 2, to be exact. Since June of 2009, these 2 photos were the only evidence we had of this different glass texture, and as I'm sure you can see, the fidelity could use a little work. Now, I say the only evidence, but that all changed on March 29th, 2023, when a historic video was uncovered. Courtesy of Mr. It's Very Easy himself, the video depicts Green Slimy, the video's creator, messaging the Minecraft IRC chat while building a small house with windows in 0.0.19a. Again, the quality leaves a fair bit to be desired, with the unregistered Hypercam 2 saying more than I ever could, but we see, clear as day, the texture of the glass and it being used in a build. In fact, we only even know what the texture I showed you earlier looks like because of this video. This discovery is something that I'm super grateful to be able to share with everyone in this series, as its history was tragically lost to time for so long, and even its discovery was something that I don't think was nearly covered enough. Alright, moving on, the next glass block texture implemented in 19A02 was the development one shown off earlier, but this version, 19A02, has not only not been found, but we don't even have a single screenshot to show either this time, so let's just move on once more. This is the final glass block. The final glass block uses way more empty pixels in the texture than the first 2, but retains the fact that it tastefully still isn't 100% transparent in the middle. The glass block has about 8 dashes of mirror color, of glass color, you know what I'm talking about, of color on the block, which is much less than the first 2. This iteration is also notable for omitting all of the blue color in the earlier textures, but mainly for the fact that it remained unchanged for so long, June 2009 to October of 2018. This texture is, of course, later replaced in the game by one with even more openness, but honestly, this glass texture will always be Minecraft to me. I mean, hell, if people are putting tape on their windows to make it look like your pixel game, you're doing something right? Anyways, the moral of the story is that now we have glass, and it is my intention to put that to full use. So, we've covered some major changes. A lot of the updates to this point couldn't dream of changes this big, so of course there's still a lot of the interesting, more minute changes that we're used to going over to still go over. First of all, 19_04 gave water and lava animation and some slightly different textures. This might not be something that really seems big, but I'd be lying if I said it doesn't add to the ambiance of the game a lot. The lava texture might have a bit of a strange bean thing going on, and they might have totally forgotten to update the edge of the world's water to be animated, but it's a good foot in the right direction, and certainly a welcome change seeing as it's the first animated texture in the game. There are, of course, some less fun things to talk about other than additions. Unsurprisingly, there were a lot of bug fixes between 19A and 19A_04, and obviously I won't be showing you those, so it comes down to the only real bug found in 19A04, the fact that water tiles have light blue bits in their borders, which is something I even struggle to see. Finally, there's something that I want to talk about that isn't necessarily a bug, but is super strange and quite annoying for someone who's played in this version for 12 hours. The scroll just scrolls the wrong way. There's no other way to put it than that. When I scroll my scroll wheel down, I expect the game to move my selection in the left direction, and it just simply moves it to the right. Oh well, what can you do? The game is still yet to add any settings of any kind, so for now, we'll just tough it out. Boring changelogs aside, that's 19A_04. The changes between it and the next version are rather light, so let's just pull the trigger and move straight up to 19A_06. Feel different yet? Well, you shouldn't. 19A_05, the only update we skipped, tried to fix a rubber banding issue, failed, threw the system clock out of sync, and then was replaced. What a legacy. You might think that 06 would be an improvement, but that depends on who you asked. At the time, one user said that the fix for the glitch system timer for the previous version worked, while the other didn't. Oh well. Yeah. Other than a possible bug that means FPS is unlimited again, that's it. This is every change up until the next update. Covered. Welcome to 19A_06. In terms of update scale, 19A did add a lot, but you already know that. I'm mentioning this for you to keep it in mind when I tell you that the next update, it's 100 times more monumental than this one. Now, I won't mention exactly what, just, to keep up our little illusion, but let's just say I want to try and make some pixel art of my own for the first time next update. I looked around the world for a good place to house some pre-colored pixel art I have in mind before the update, to go with the new stuff, but no edges of the map really seemed suitable, so I decided to dig out an entire mountain's worth of land. Do you see how these episodes take so long? I'd be lying if I said it wasn't quite a process, but this was the final product of the excavation. So far it only houses 2 builds, with, a very easy and a psychotic mode for your comments below to guess what I've built. I'm super happy with the current product, and I'm extra excited to see how this looks when the next update arrives. As stated earlier, this video's been a pretty long time in the making, so forgive me if in going over what's new I end up covering some builds that I've already shown you, or if you see something new and I forget to cover it. In fact, if you're a fan from way back and noticed I missed something, definitely comment it down below for me to cover it in the next episode. Regardless, here's a walkthrough of hopefully everything new that I've built in our town. Here we are. I'm starting at the docks because of I'm totally avoiding very inconspicuously. I built a boat. I'm technically standing on boats that I have built before, but that was around the time that this was an impressive build, so I decided I'd one-up it, and, I was really struggling for things to build with the sponge. I built some water features and stuff over in some worlds over there, but I was wanting to build something in our actual town with sponge as like an exterior, and I could not come up with anything. Because I've got at least a pretty robust theme going on here of, at least somewhat sort of rustic, wooden houses, and I've got a sort of medieval theme on this side, and so I thought, well, I could do a boat with the sponge being the sail, and I actually think it works out pretty well, and you can see the flag from a ways away, which I quite like. And actually, I think this is a really nice ship. I really like the shape of it and all, and I guess I might as well go swim. I did build an interior for it, so I guess this is probably worth it, even though I don't like to edit the walkthroughs. I like having a bit of scripted and a bit of unscripted. What can I say? Alright, now that we're over here, I've got a bit of an access hole in the bottom, just so I don't normally have to bust in, but I might as well, just for the video, show you the full view. So, of course, obviously, you can go up the side of the ship here and helm up the steering wheel, so you can pull out to sail. But also, I've got a little underground under the deck quarters here. Like maybe you could have a little bed for the captain under here or something like that, but it's just a little mini ship, but it actually adds a lot. This water, I've had the idea that I'm going to use water eventually to get around in boats, and so I've dug out these tunnels and access ways, but there haven't actually been any boats in the water to take advantage of them, so obviously they're not driving in there, but out to the open water in that direction. Anyways, I've obviously made some changes here, as you're going to see coming over the hill. I've changed this house to have glass windows. Now, I've built historically all of my houses that I built with the leaves as the windows, because that's all that we had, and I'm not trying to future-proof in that kind of a way. I like having older builds in the older areas, but I decided I'd change this one. This one had, I believe, leaves in the windows, but it might have had nothing like this house, and I changed this one to glass just because I can. I wanted to see what it looked like. I think it's a fun little experiment, but I'm not going to do that with all the buildings. Like, I'll definitely leave my my big mansion with leaves and buildings like this with leaves. But, anyways, I'm just admiring the piles of sand that I'm no longer able to build with. actually very deeply disheartening when I booted up this update and remember that that's what I was going to be stuck with for the next 20 hours, which is what I've got 20 hours accumulated over the course of my year waiting for this episode to come out. Jesus, I don't even want to, we're not even going to talk about that. I'm going the wrong way. The builds that I've all made are up this way. You can see I've got the fog up for performance reasons. The world is big enough that it's starting to actually kill my computer, but you can see here this silhouette of this building sort of framed in the street I really liked, and I thought that was a nice build. But we already had this sort of club, the sort of billiards club, but I built another house here alongside by the sort of viewing platform. It's a nicer sort of smaller but basic house. It's got a very basic shape, but that's because I had more advanced ideas in terms of interior. I wanted to do an actual basement, and I thought a fun way of doing that would be to have this sort of central staircase with a second sort of storage basement underneath. And so that's exactly what I did. And this, I'm going to cut that, excuse me. This, that was horrible. Anyway, this staircase leads down to this water feature in this underwater section, because now that I've got these sponges, I think it's a little more safe to finally actually work with water, and the water mechanics in these versions are just so unique. It's so different from anything else you'd ever play with, the way that it's like practically an infection. And I wanted to be able to harness the water a little bit, so I did something that I couldn't otherwise do with before the sponges, and I built this sort of central water feature that goes down to bedrock, and as well allows me access up here, and it also has a little bit of a path down to a dome that I built with some similar doors made of the sponge. I really like this. I think this is super fun. I like this idea of like the doors and the space. I've always, as a kid, I always built like domes underwater, and so it being plain and having practically nothing in it it's like a feature to me. It's not a negative. But I did do all the decorating on the walls here and the patterning of the floors. I tried to make it feel as detailed as possible when you can't do a sort of fake interior like in here with some, whatever this is, grill or something. But along with this building, I've made two more along here. This tower was already built, but I decided I needed another little house to sort of frame this courtyard. And I wanted to do a sponge interior. I talked about how much I wanted to try and actually build with sponge, and I thought, screw it, I'll build a house and have a sponge interior. But I actually quite like the interior of this one, despite it being so, I guess we'll call it nonsensical. That's probably generous though, but I actually quite like what I did with the roof and the general layout of the place, so I'm not really mad. I also, just behind this tower here, built on this sort of overlook, what I'm calling a restaurant, I've got ideas for what all these places could be. Like some of these houses are more residential in my mind, and some of them have more of a purpose. But this I built, I said, well, what would be a good place to have a restaurant right here? Because there's this nice sort of overlook that's hanging over this nice sort of guarded area. But it eventually is not going to be very nice. Like, I imagine that this will eventually just be a bunch of houses and sort of some shrubbery. And so I thought, well, what better to use this view and to sort of make the view nicer itself than a restaurant? So if you come down here, I've got some tables for guests to be sitting under the patio, or they can choose to go upstairs here, and they can have a seat on the roof and eat some of their delectable their greens or what have you. But I also wanted to do another basement in here. I've been trying to make the interiors a little more lively, even with the limited space. So if you come down here, there's a sort of tap bar that you can come down to that I made using these the saplings, because I discovered there's the bug that I talked about in the last episode where the blocks that are supposed to decay simply aren't, and I think it has to do with the size of the world. I think that's the conclusion that I saw someone online come to, that I agree with, that it's just too big and the block updates fail. But because of that, I'm going to abuse it. I might as well. I figured that if I put these, the perspective kind of forces it to look like sort of spouts that are coming down, which is, I thought, super ingenious. It's something that I saw actually done by a good friend of mine, Soybean, a fellow you should definitely be checking out, but that built in Classic Plus using ropes in a way that that was sort of like this, where they were used, I think, as like either taps or lanterns or something like this. And I really like the look of this. I think it looks really both unique and also good. Like, it's a convincing illusion. So I decided I'd incorporate it when I discovered I could. But obviously that won't stay like that. I imagine throughout some version that'll automatically pop off and be destroyed. But it'll be fun while it lasts, and it's fun to document while we have it. I probably didn't have to jump off there, but there's some more building over here. I've been expanding along the path. I've been expanding the path itself. I don't think it went out this far. But I've also been expanding the attractions along here, and so you can sort of see the flag there. And so I wanted to put a bit of a market in this area. This sort of this is where the river thins the area, and there's a bit of an outcropping here. I don't know if you can see it, where there's just the wall sort of curves around, and so this is a very thin, almost a choke point in the city. And I've been trying to fill out the one side of it before sort of moving on to the next. And I think I've been doing at least a somewhat good job of that with like the zoo and all the buildings along there. But I've finally come to the point where I've started to run out of space here, and I want to start to expand some more. And so down here I've built this, what I'm deeming to be sort of a market. I like this idea of sort of having this outcropping, and I ended up putting a shop in the middle, but I mean, obviously everything here is temporary. I just like the idea of having somewhere to come through and to be able to buy something. And there isn't actually any merchandise in here, but maybe once I get some access to some fresher blocks, I can spruce that up. I also built sort of a simpler, smaller house just along here. This was something I did a while ago. I imagine this might have even already been covered, but it's got sponges in the roof, so I guess not. But sort of just a smaller, simpler house, just so I could have something to be on the foot of my larger sort of pagoda that I built. I wanted to build something like this that would be tall, to sit here and sort of frame this street. Because I like to imagine sightlines is something that the boy Ryan said to me that really stuck with me when we were talking about building on Back to Beta. And I was just thinking about that as I walked down this path and thought I needed to put something big and tall here. And I really like the shape of this building, and it's got a nice nice floor that I gave it. But more than anything, I really like what it does to the skyline. So we'll say. I also built something further down here. This is another example of my of the tragedies of the cobblestone. The lack of being able to actually use it meant that when I was building this little creeper statue, my breaking of this spoke was detrimental. So I put this arrow here so I can remember it anyways. But I put this little creeper statue up here so I could have something in this outcropping, so I kept walking by, because I've been doing some more building in the more modern area, as I'm sure you will soon see. Good evening, I'm Griffin. And I'm Griffin. In tonight's top story, Griffin is playing more Minecraft. Are we sure we're getting this right? Okay, this is dumb, but it's true, I actually am. I've recently been playing on just the coolest SMP server ever. I would say I was invited, but let's be real, I have no place on Back to Beta, Minecraft's premier beta 1.7.3 server, with members Boxblair, Captain Cat, Capsa, Deadly Dirtblock, Dialco, Docspot, Eggfing, Gengar Juice 69, Gory, Gray, Hello World, Kelphone, Monkster, Mr. Sunday, Mine 1001, Pepper, The Boy Ryan, The Last Block, Jaren, and Whammy. Now, all these people make amazing content, both on and off the server, and this is something that I actually hope to be able to join in on more actively now. So, click the link in the description below and join the Discord to engage in the community and talk to me and other like-minded old Minecraft lovers. Or don't. But don't feel surprised when the episode drops. So, at least by now, I imagine you've seen whatever I've edited together. God knows how that's going to come together. I'm doing this in one take still. But this is my radio broadcast station, as I'm calling it. I guess it's sort of cheating, because when I built this, I was imagining I was going to build some sort of telescope or something. But I came up with the idea of having a radio broadcast station, because it's in the modern district. That was just too good to pass up. And I really liked the idea of having a satellite dish on it. And so this build, I'm going to walk up there actually. This thing was so hard to get to actually look correct. Like, just to get the shape to not look incredibly strange, I found to be a whole challenge in and of itself. But I actually, oh my god, my game's really chugging here. I actually really like how it's come together. I think that the shape of it is essentially perfect. It's a little chunky in the back, but really, like, for classic, I have to say, my game's chugging, but we're pushing through it. I'm really a fan of this. I think it's because I'm loading new chunks. I've got the render distance down, so it doesn't do that all at once anymore. Anyways, really happy with this build, and I'm happy with the whole build itself. I really like the shape of this dome, which was inspired, of course, by its telescopic origins as a observatory. But I also really like just the way that this entrance room segments here into the recording studio, where you, of course, can have your recordings done, and you can, you know, talk to the cameras and the lights and what have you, while all the folks are here editing in their desks. Looking at the productivity board. Anyways, I really like this build. I'm really happy with it, and I hope you like the silly little segment that went along with it. But I guess while I'm here, I might as well mention, I'm sure you saw it in the background footage, I decided to replace some of these with glass as well. I, of course, as I said, am not going to replace everything, but I thought every other building could definitely be glass. I thought there's no harm in that. And while I was at it, I gave them each interiors, so I'll cover this as well. I put I guess what I wanted to sort of look like a modern sculpture in here, but when I was building it, I thought it too good an opportunity to pass up to make it into some parkour. So this is something that I, you know, obviously enjoy doing in modern, but the parkour in this version is very limited. It's rudimentary, but it is there. Like, there is still, you know, skills to be learned, and you can get like 2-block, you know, up 1 jumps and things like that. Like, there is a skill ceiling to it, and so I thought it'd be sort of fun if I made this into at least a somewhat challenging course. So I'll try and see if I can make this jump, but my spacebar is really selling me out here. But here we go. There you are. That's the end of it. So, you know, not entirely trivial. It's a little bit fun, and for classic, I'd say this is pretty good. You know, for classic, you'll see what I can do in beta. But I also replaced all the glass on this one. I wanted there to be one that had less glass to see what that looked like one of these first 3, and then one that would have been really impressive to see transparently. So I, of course, picked the nicest looking one, and I actually think that this one does look really nice. It has that sort of hourglass almost shape to it. But if you come, I think it must be through this building. I also built a little palisade behind here, a little hangout area. This was basically just going to be nothing, I realized, because it was just such a small little outcropping, and so I decided to beautify it up a little bit while we still don't have a big stone wall here, because this will eventually become really goofy. But for now, I thought that this was a really nice sort of view and a really lovely place to hang out, and so I put some benches here, and I also thought that I could use the sponge to be like a little park. So here, you can imagine, is like that sort of foam that they put on playgrounds now, and a sort of plastic slide, and of course a swing set with the rope hanging it down. And I think that about covers it for what I've built. I'm sure there's more out in the abyss that or not the abyss, but the expanse that you'll see me cover later on. But for now, I think that's the main attractions. I guess I also put a floor in there, but I think that about covers it. I've done a lot over the time that I've had, but I think that everything is both good building and also some of the best building I've been doing. I think I'm really starting to finally get a hold of what it's like to build in Classic. I think maybe before I was either not ambitious enough or didn't really have a grasp of what I was able to do, but I think I'm starting to actually really start to nail like the more complicated builds and some of the bigger scale stuff. Before I let you go here, I feel like I'm gonna let you know a little bit of what's just been going on in my life. Shit, I might as well if I'm gonna keep the series going on for another 2 or more years. So let's get into it. Since the last episode, a lot has gone on in my personal life. I passed a grade of school, I played a boatload of cool games, I'll throw them on the screen now, watched more movies than I can even dream of putting on the screen, so I don't know, give me letterbox clout. I got a job, got my license, beat Minecraft at the lake with my IRL friends on the first version of Legacy Console Edition. I mean, this is maybe not on the same level, but hey, you clicked on a Minecraft video, you'll get it. Left the continent, North America, for the first time ever on a week-long France trip with my friends. I'll also throw up some photos of that. That was more fun than I can even put into words. I bought a sick-ass Peggle rug. Okay, I joke, but I really did get up to a lot. But on the same note, I did just up and leave, and did so without even as much as a community tab post. All the same, people kept watching, and subscribing, like nearly 100 people, in the middle of a year of nothing, and I really can't express how motivated it just made me feel to come back. To anyone, and everyone who has watched in the past, and to anyone who chose to subscribe, thank you. And to even everyone who's still watching, and everyone who's made it this far, thank you. New things will come on the channel. I've learned not to make promises, but I will promise this. that if you subscribe, a new video will be in your inbox, eventually. Thank you all for the support. Bye. Breaking news. Don't use that.